All right, so we looked at very, very briefly, we looked at what happens with an economy that is dealing with a depression, a recession, and kind of what we can expect in terms of when things kind of bottom out in relation to the stock market. We also considered and kind of very briefly mentioned the previous administration, the previous Hoover administration, and how things turned out. Well, obviously, it's how, we obviously see how things turned out under the Hoover administration when you look at the Great Depression, right? So, what does this all mean for today? What should we kind of uh, how do we look at and consider all of that information and make it relevant to this upcoming 2020 election when we see what's going on before our eyes with the stock market? Again, if you're like, well, what the heck are you talking about is going on with the stock market? It was bad today. It was bad. If you want to know the details of how bad it was, if you want to know all the specifics, I'm not going to turn this into some very wonky podcast episode. You can go and search for some sort of podcast, which I will not recommend, that talks about the stock market. Everyone knows that, as I mentioned in before I ended the last segment, that we are less than 2 months away from the November election. What we saw today in terms of the stock market and how bad, how horribly it performed today, this, I don't care what anybody says to you. The only thing that I will tell you about the stock market is that what you saw today was an indication of how investors are feeling due to a lack of stimulus. Everyone thought that whether it was, after the July 31st expiration date came and went for that $600 for the unemployed, or other types of stimulus that we had, what we're seeing now, with funds being depleted, with the, people, businesses using those funds and then being just long gone from the PPP. When you look at everything that's happening, when you look at what the airlines are going through and the fact that they're going to be laying off thousands of people, here in a few days, few weeks, people did not think that we were going to still be in a position of demanding and needing stimulus. We thought, first and foremost, that first kind of set of stimulus that we had was enough, because if you remember what they were saying at the time, oh, this isn't going to be so long, just a few weeks and we'll be over it, poof, that will be gone. Obviously, here we are months later, and that's not the fact. The fact is, this is going on far beyond what any of us thought would happen. And when you couple that with the fact that we are not only not receiving any stimulus, this current environment is one in which it is ever more apparent that the likelihood of receiving stimulus is just diminishing by the day, by the hour, by the second. All of this is why we saw what we saw today with the stock market. There is no hope for stimulus. And when you look at the fact that as we approach the election, as I mentioned in another episode, I've actually mentioned it in several episodes, as we get closer to the election, there is absolutely a lack of incentive to stimulate the economy on the parts of politicians. Everyone knows, God rest her soul, RBG passed away, and that in and of itself is causing you now have Republicans kind of saying, okay, we've got to make sure we, fill that seat before the election because we obviously have a president who can do it. Then you have, the Democrats, and that's actually interesting. Another show for another day. You have specifically on that subject, you have politicians who have said before that if they were in a time particularly like this, they would actually let the next president go ahead and do that. But it's another subject for another day. You have that. You have, did you hear our government is supposed to be shutting down? We need more funding. We previously, it was agreed that we would kind of just pass the funds just by themselves to go ahead and fund the government. But now we have the Democrats demanding, no, you know what? If you want anything done, we need a comprehensive stimulus package. So we kind of got a lot of things going on that are making this situation worse. And again, as we get closer to the election, it is less and less likely that anything is going to be done. This is why we saw what we saw today on the market. It used to be in previous weeks that the only people, who were dealing with the realities of the pandemic and the negative financial implications of it, it used to be, as recently as a few weeks ago, that the only people who really were feeling that were individual Americans, because their personal forms of stimulus had run out. Their true eviction moratoriums had run out unless their states and localities had decided to do something. Their extended unemployment benefits had run out. Their one-time stimulus check, that money was gone for most people the day that they found out they were getting it. They had already planned what bills they needed to pay that they were behind on. Those people already knew how bad things were. But now businesses who had stimulus well beyond what the average American had received, they are now in a position where their stimulus has dried up. Again, look at what's going on with the airline industry, and they're coming with their hands out. Help us, please help us. And I'm not, okay, we're not even going to go there. I think I mentioned that on a previous episode. I'm going to leave that alone. But they are coming with their hands out now, demanding help. They are, hey, you need to help us because it's freaking bad out here, right? Now everybody is feeling the effects, and that is why we are now seeing the stock market panic. Not to be mean, but the average American isn't invested in the stock market. I mean, while I would wish in my own personal kind of mind, in my own personal heart, I would wish that more Americans could invest in the stock market. But your average American doesn't invest in it. I think it's somewhere like 40% of Americans actually invest in the stock market. But that fact considered, that estimate considered, it has not been the people who are the people that are mostly invested in the stock market are not your average people. And those people, again, have been very, very disconnected from reality, and they're just now getting their own personal dose of reality, right? And again, markets are going to get worse. They understand with what they're seeing that, the data and our current reality, just looking at these politicians, shows us things are going to get worse. And so investor fears are rising. They are actually selling. I'm going to be very honest and transparent here. Again, I'm not making this about I'm not giving anybody any type of investment advice. So I'm just saying that up front. I'm just telling you, I'm about to tell you what has been my personal experience in the stock market. I invest in stocks, and I also invest in crypto. And so early on, when everything was kind of happening, while a lot of people were kind of singing the praises of the stock market, how I mentioned earlier that things were going so well and prices were just going and going and going and people were just making money and not even looking at the data, but just kind of looking at the reality of what was going on before looking at the data, and then kind of having it reinforced when looking at data, I knew, oh, heck no, like I've got to pull out. So not too long ago, I'm not going to say exactly when, because again, I don't want to make this seem like I'm telling people, oh, you should have done this when I did, or these were the key indicators that I use. Just put it like this. I had made a decision not too long ago. I sold every stock that I had. I was like, no way, I'm out of this. Like there's no way you're going to find me mixed up in this. I then took some of that money and went full liquid. And then I took some of that money and I went into crypto. I was already in crypto, but I strengthened my position in crypto with cryptocurrency. I made what some might call kind of a dumb decision to kind of look at to invest in some forms of currency that I had no experience in, and that position cost me money. I lost about 30% of what I put into all of my crypto. I lost about 30% and ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to just go and just leave this and go full on liquid, right? So, anywho, I personally, not because I'm some genius, because I'm not. I'm a very specific type of trader. Some people they trade for the long term. I don't. I'm not gonna make this about trading. So, anyways, so just put it like this: Brittany pulled out. I didn't do this because I'm so smart. I didn't do this because I'm better. Because if I were, I'd have a lot more money than I do, right? But I saw the writing on the wall, and I'm not saying that people who didn't see the writing on the wall, I'm not saying that anything was wrong with them not seeing the writing on the wall. But hopefully they see it now. Hopefully they see that these recent months of what's been going on, this high people have been riding on, it's not sustainable, and it really could only last so long, right? As we move closer to the election, chances are it's going to get worse, even after the election. Quite frankly, you know what? I'm not going to even say that because I don't want to. I'm trying to be careful with what I say. So I'm just going to leave this here. I say all of this not because I wanted to make today's show exclusively about the stock market, because I wanted to talk about it or talk about how I went full on liquid. I wanted to talk about this because it's important for one, the people who have known that we've been in this bad position, your average American, to know that now business is starting to fill it. Now people who have been riding high, denying the realities that you have been feeling and knowing, they are now getting that confirmation that you have been right. We need more stimulus. Now, I hate to break it to you. Does this mean that we are likely to see a stimulus package before the election? Does this mean that I change my mind and say, you know what, because of this and because they're seeing the light now, we're going to see a stimulus before the election? Honestly, guys, I don't believe so. I honestly am willing to still stand on my position of the fact that it's very unlikely that we're going to see some form of stimulus before the election. What I do think this means is that how in the last episode, I think it was directly the last episode, I talked about how you're not really hearing stimulus being talked about really in the mainstream really anymore. I do think what this means is we are going to see kind of a reinvigorated conversation. Is that conversation going to lead to action? No. In Brittany's opinion, no. But is it going to lead to a renewed, reinvigorated conversation? Yes. That I think is hope. And I know that hope and change has been the name of the game for the last how many years, and I know a lot of people are losing hope. And I don't want to pacify you just by saying, oh, hope and change, it's all going to be okay. No, because it's quite frankly, unless we all collectively take action, it's not going to be okay. But there is hope in knowing that we can rectify this issue. There is action that we can take. There is something we can do to make this better. What can we do? We'll talk about that in just a moment.